Tonight's conversation, our first conversation, poses a particular challenge right from the introduction itself, because to try and introduce Khushbu and to try and introduce Khushbu in Chennai is a bit like trying to introduce Neil Armstrong to the moon. But I'm going to give it a shot because partly in how we introduce her is a framing for the conversation we'd love to have tonight. She is, of course, mega stardom, but she is a cult in herself. She has spawned everything, of course, as you know, from a temple to a type of idli to a sari brand. And really, who else can say that? But it is the fact that she wears every one of these roles on her sleeve as a power voice. She doesn't just take her celebrity for granted, she does it justice. And that cannot be said of too many people. She is a vocal activist, she is a vocal politician, she is always prepared to speak her mind, and it is an absolute privilege to start talking about some of the conversations, not just in her work, but being female entails with her. To also join us on this conversation, it's an equal privilege to have another woman who has gone on to be a first. She's the first female editor of the India Today magazine. It took them over 30 years, but finally they got to it. She is also, of course, a journalist for over 3 decades. She is a commentator and most recently author of a book called No Regrets, The Guilt-Free Woman's Guide to a Good Life. And the words guilt-free there are really the starting point for this night's conversation with both power women, because the idea of what women put themselves through to try and have everything, to try and accomplish everything, is a question that not just women need to ask, but men need to ask. What do we do to women when we make it hard for them to be their best selves? And I could not think of two better people to have this conversation with me. I invite up on stage Khushbu and Kaveree Bamzai. Kaveree, I will start with you because actually some of the themes in your book are a great place to start this conversation with both of you. I just wanted to know why you wrote a book that says The Guilt-Free Woman's Guide. Is guilt such a big problem for women that you felt it needs to be tackled front and center?
I always say the choice. First, of course, thank you, Chennai. I think it's a wonderful city. And I'm so happy to be here rather than in Delhi, where if it's not pollution, then they're burning down buses. They basically want to kill us. So this is really a very calm and soothing environment. Thank you. And more than that, I think I'm privileged to be with Khushbu because, I was in India today when she made that famous comment about men should not expect their wives to be virgins. And there were 22 cases against her, right?
46.
46. She fought each and every one of them, and she didn't give up. She went right up to the Supreme Court, and she was speaking the truth, and she stood up for it. And then I was reading recently that you went and slapped somebody in the Congress party as well. Well done, you. He was misbehaving with you. So I think here's a woman who's always stood up for what she believes in, and especially in the film industry, since I have covered cinema, I can tell you it's a big rarity. So I'm really privileged to be here in this city with her. But I think guilt is something that is in our DNA, and I always say that I had two options, either to sort of be in permanent therapy or to sit down and, write about my experiences and of the experiences of women like me, more successful maybe. But I realized that all of us have the guilt DNA in us, no matter how successful, no matter how accomplished. It takes a lot of work to get over it, but I think to find your success, to revel in it, to speak up about it, to stand up for yourself, I think it's something that I found very difficult. And I suppose misery loves company, so I was happy to note that I was not alone. And I think when I look back through 30 years of my journalism, I realized that I'd had a lot of these conversations with a lot of these women, but I wasn't consciously looking for this, but it sort of happened. And I think I realized that I'm not alone. So I thought I needed to share that story and to tell women that it is tough, but you can get there.
You know, and I wanted to start, Khushbu, by saying that with 4 decades of work already behind you, which is just staggering, there is no question that the appearance of seeming to manage everything well cannot come easy. Did you struggle? Do you struggle? Because I think the stories of struggle are probably more necessary to share than the stories of succeeding, right? We
Hi.
don't hear of the struggles enough. Please tell us.
Hi, good evening. Vanakkam to everyone. Yes, I don't think, I would be here if there was no struggle. Whatever I say, I speak, I do. It does come after a lot of struggle. Every day is a struggle. Anybody for that matter, any woman for that matter, however successful you are, you definitely have to struggle because unfortunately, in a country which we say it's a very, very progressive country like India, we still have most of the section of people who look at women very differently. They expect a woman to be within the norms of what the society has built for them, live the life as to what the society decides they have to live in. So the struggle is every day there, and I'm happy the struggle is there, because if not for the struggle, I wouldn't realize what my inner strength would be. So I'm glad that every day there's a struggle. I have to fight my way out. I have to fight through the problems I face, because that gives me the power, and that makes me realize that, hey, woman, you're made of a ton of stuff. Keep going, you're on the right track.
So I think one of the questions that often is asked about, of course, the male role in this is often talked about and needs to continue being talked about. Do women support each other enough? And what is a way in which you've received support, or you felt like women could have supported you, other women could have supported you at a time when maybe they didn't? You know, did that happen? And what would you have liked to have happened differently?
Yes, I mean, in a profession like cinema, it's now you see a lot of people being friendly with each other. But in my days when I was struggling, trying to get a foothold in cinema, I've seen most of them a little apprehensive or a little intimidated. That fear sets in. Oh, there's a new girl coming in. Will she overtake us? Why does she have 2 songs and I have only 1? Why she has 3 costume changes in a song and I have only 2? So you go through that where you see women being insecure. But for me, I don't know. Probably the kind of atmosphere I have been in, though being born and brought up in a very, very conservative Muslim family, I should say that my mom played a huge role in letting me be who I am. And there used to be one person, I must say, Mrs. Ubaldina Fernandez, who was actually my hairdresser for 28 years, but she was a camera woman in her own right. And then she decided to shift her profession, and she was with me for 28 years. And I think her influence was the most biggest influence in my life, because she was a single woman, single parent, and very, very confident. And I think I derived a lot of my confidence. I took a lot of courage from her. She imbibed, because she was with me when my mom couldn't be with me. So she joined me when I was just 14, and then she was with me until she breathed her last in 2011. But I think it's from her where I have got this so much of strength, because she drove that into me. She's like, no, you have to be on your own. And I think after that, I have been friends. When you look at my friends, we have been friends for 33 years, 32 years, 30 years, those kind of friends. And they played a very huge role. They're women, and they played a very huge role in being with me. Like when Kaveree was talking about 2005, when the entire world was going against me, one person who stood up for me out of the blue was Suhasini Maniratnam. And she faced almost around 32 cases herself for supporting me. So, people do come out, women do come out. It's just that when you're expecting, and when the expectations are not met, you feel a little let down. But fortunately for me, I was never expecting it. So when Suhasini came up and supported me, and then people like Kaveree and the entire force, there was a huge force, a separate force. When I used to go out, people used to say, congratulations, please continue the fight, we stand with you. Unknown people, absolutely. But their support was huge. So, and most of them were women. So professionally, yes, but otherwise I think most of the women, thinking women, were with me.
Kaveri, when you started writing, and I think the pressure of having it all, because women don't have the option of failing at something to succeed at something else, right? What did you find you spoke to a host of really accomplished women for this book. Sudha Murthy is in there, Ariana Huffington is in there, across disciplines, Twinkle Khanna, Sania Mirza. Did they all tell stories of having to fail at something to succeed at something else?
Yeah, and I think what is interesting is exactly what Khushbu said, that I think increasingly women are acknowledging the women who went before them and the women who are coming after them. And I think that is such a huge change, and it's a wonderful change, because I think unless we build an old girls network, we'll never beat the old boys network. So I think that is something that women realize that they have to do. And the other thing I think that Khushbu symbolizes, you cannot be what you cannot see. So to have somebody like Khushbu, who's been successful as an actor, who's been successful as a politician, as just somebody who speaks her mind, I think these roles, these women, such women need to be celebrated and their voices need to be amplified. Not that Khushbu needs amplification. She can take care of herself. And I think what is unusual about her, which is what I really love about her, is that she's able to turn the anger against her into a sort of badge of honor. She wears it like a shield. So even when there's an insult on Twitter, I've seen that she just turns it around. Or when they discovered suddenly that you're a Muslim, she sort of wore that as a badge of honor. So I think increasingly...
I think you said to the person, well, you're 40-some years too late to this discovery.
So I think increasingly, I found that among all the women I spoke to as well, that, they're tired of sort of being apologetic. They're tired of sort of saying sorry for everything. And they're saying now, okay, we've, been here in the public space for 30 years, 40 years. It's time we were acknowledged.
So actually, that it ties in with the conversation that I was leading to, which is really, has it taken doing to not be apologetic about your success? Because you're almost expected to be, say, surprised by it or deferential to, whatever, it was difficult or people helped me. And acknowledgement is very different from apology. You wear your success with absolutely no discomfort, and female power, which makes people uncomfortable, which makes men uncomfortable, which also makes other women uncomfortable sometimes, a display of female power. What is your relationship with power and with success?
Well, the relationship with my power is I'm sitting here. That's my power. And if not for, I'm sure I'm not invited here because I'm an actor. I'm invited here because I speak my mind being a woman. And that is my power. And I appreciate that. I really celebrate that power I have. If I wouldn't speak my mind, I would have been dead long back. I need to speak my mind because I cannot speak like somebody who I am not. I think and I have to speak.
And this started in your life from a very young age, I think at 16, and in a troubled relationship with your father, you took him head on, which is A, male, B, a parental authority figure. And then,
C, like I said, very conservative Muslim family.
And then to say, I will not only make my way in the world, I will make my way in the world such that I will look after the other women, like your mother. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back, probably then being a 16-year-old, you feel it was a very, very traumatizing time. But I think I'm glad that happened, because if that didn't have to happen, probably I wouldn't be here today. So I haven't seen my dad or spoken to him in 33 years. And I'm glad that I haven't, because my daughter's right here, my firstborn. And she's a 19-year-old young kid, and one young lady to me, she's still a baby, and she's like, why, ma? There, I'm embarrassing her already. So I think for me, it was very important that when I have my children, they look up at me. And I somehow always wanted girls. I never wanted boys in my life, because probably I've grown up with 3 brothers, so I've seen enough of boys. So I wanted girls. And fortunately for me, my husband wanted girls. So he's like, no, let's have 2 girls. I'm glad if there are 2 girls. So I think for me it was important that I, you know, lead a path. I walk the path where my daughters turn around and they derive the strength and they say, Ma, I'm proud of you. That was very important for me. I can't be a failure. If someone finds one reason for not getting a job done, I find 20 reasons as to why the job could be done. So for me, the traumatizing period was, it was very, very struggling period. I have seen days without food, survived only on water, no money, didn't have money to pay the rent for the house we lived in, didn't have the money to pay for the car we had, so those guys had to take the car back, travel by autos, public transport. But I'm glad all of that happened. I don't look back and I see that as the gray period of my life. I take that as a green period of my life because that gave me the positivity. That told me that, okay, this is the time you need to start as to what you want to be when you're close to your 50. And here I am.
I wanted to, and you mentioned if somebody says one reason why a job can't be done, you'll find 20 that it can be. Not in any way taking away from both the positivity of that or the sense of getting things done. But do women not allow ourselves the room for failure? And is the cult of perfectionism something that because one of the challenges in trying to do it all, nobody has ever asked a man to do it all. He has routinely hired people to do it all or outsourced it.
Or he has a wife.
Or he has a wife to do it all. When women take on doing it all, we not only not allow ourselves room to fail in any one of those things, we work 20 times harder. Is there a way to not just escape this trap, but to say, it's okay to fail, I cannot get everything done? How do we allow ourselves to become women who say, I'll still be fabulous if I fail at half the things I try?
That is the whole point of my book. I think we've had this cult of perfection, and I always say there's no superhero cape that's made for me that can carry my body weight. So I'm glad I'm not a superwoman, and I don't want to be because, sometimes your life is a mess and you have to embrace it and you have to sort of get through it. But if you set such high standards for yourself, you're either going to be completely neurotic or you're just going to be completely neurotic. So I think you have to allow yourself the failure. You have to allow yourself to fall. You have to allow yourself some slack, cut yourself some slack. I think we don't do that enough. And in fact, there was a very interesting anecdote. There's a young woman who was listening to a discussion that I went to recently, and she had a very interesting point of view. She said, women get first chances, okay, increasingly. So you'll be allowed to marry someone of your own choice, so you'll be allowed to work. You don't get a second chance. So she said, for instance, in my case, I was allowed to marry someone I wanted. But then, I have to have children. Suppose I don't want children. You can't be a professional aunt with no kids, which somebody has coined a term for it, pank, by the way, which I find very interesting. So the point she was making is that women don't get second chances. And I think that's quite right. We just get that one chance and then we're supposed to be, just excel at it and that's it. But I think we have to allow ourselves to fail. We have to allow ourselves to embrace the messiness of life and then tell other people that it's all right. We're not perfect.
So, Khushbu, from age, you were a child star, and you've been, like we said, working for 40 years. You've brought up two girls. Of course, you're married. You run a household. You said you cook. You live in an extended joint family. You work. What is the invisible labor and the invisible price for that you have put in that will never be visible to anybody?
I don't have me time. That is what I lose out on. But I don't regret again because whatever I do for my family, it's out of love. I love doing it. I love waking up in the morning at 5:30, irrespective of what time I sleep. Of course, they're big now, but then when they were schooling, get them ready, cook for them, what they have to take for lunch or breakfast. And I personally used to cook, go to the school, drop them, come back, go for my shoot, make sure that the breakfast was ready for my husband, make sure that my mother-in-law has taken her medicines. I love being in a joint family. I love big families. So I think I do it out of choice. So I don't regret that I don't have my time. My time is what I spend with children. Evenings you sit together, you play a board of carom, or you play some Uno game, or you play, those traditional old games, or you just sit back and watch some TV. I think that time is what I cherish the most. Rather than being my time, I'm happy being at home. My husband keeps teasing me that over the years you have become like Sundar C because I don't see you going out. He's a home bird. So I think I won't say I compromise. Given a choice, I can do things what I want to do. But I love doing what I want to do, and that is being home with my family. So I don't miss out on anything. But yes, I'm saying it's, like Kaveree said, it's perfectly fine for a woman to fail. You cannot be given a second chance. You have to fight for the second chance. There is always a second option. You always have an option. If the plan B, A doesn't work, you have to have plan B. If the plan B doesn't work, plan C, you have 24 Alberts, keep going. So that is how I work. I said, it's okay. If I fail, perfectly fine. There are times when I'm a mess. There are times when I'm late. There are times when my cooking goes completely, it's a disaster. And it just happened, I think, day before when my daughter landed from London. Was trying to do something and it turned out to be a disaster. So we had to actually go on Swiggy and order something. So it's perfectly fine to fail, to understand where you went wrong. I am basically a very happy person. So I try to find positivity in every negativity which I see, I come across. So I'm happy with what I'm doing.
Kaveree, it's interesting that the book has a chapter on anger, and not just anger as use it as a positive force, but acknowledging the power of that anger for women to push back against everything that is often asked of them. Why did you feel anger was so important, and what is the nature of that pushback that you feel is necessary on the multiple demands? Again, the point you made very well, out of choice, everything goes. Out of choice, you may choose to sleep 4 hours, spend 5 hours in the kitchen and put together the most glorious meal. And out of choice, you should be able to say, sorry buddy, there's an app, get your dinner. What is the source of that anger that you think now exists? And what is the kind of pushback we need to do with that anger constructively?
I think there are two things to this. One, I think increasingly the world as we know and the country as we know is a mess, more or less because men have been running it. So I think it's time for women to really take back the country for themselves and find leadership roles in society, at work, in corporate offices, demand it. Because too often we are so underconfident about our abilities, We do it all, but yet we feel that we're not good enough, So one, I feel very angry about the fact that we women don't speak up often enough. And two, that anger has to be used for a good cause. And the cause can not be just yourself. The cause has to be bigger than you. I think that's something that my generation of women, perhaps, we were a little too focused on the work and home and what used to be called the work-life balance. Unfortunately, that question doesn't get asked anymore, thank God, because no man was ever asked that. Every woman at work was asked about the work-life balance. But I think we need to engage with the world outside as well, with society, and to provide society with some sort of leadership. And as I said, if it's a 16-year-old girl who's speaking truth to power now on climate change and getting President Trump all, hot and bothered, it's because I think women now increasingly have to use that anger for positive change. And I think all great movements, whether it was the anti-rape movement in the 70s when the Mathura case happened, or whether it was Nirbhaya, or whether it's the anger and disgust about the Hyderabad rape, or even if you look at the dissent on campuses, you see increasingly it's being led by young women. And I think that's a very, very powerful change-making force. They want to stand up for themselves. They don't want to take, shit anymore.
So I wanted to ask you about the powerful, successful women you've known personally and the women you have engaged with for this book. The natures of their accomplishments are different, their backgrounds are different, everything they've done is different. But are there unifying strands that you found common to the women who in fact had the nerve and the spunk to stay the course?
Yes, definitely. Today when you have the men power world over reacting to what the women have to say, it shows that the women do have the spunk. It's just that we have now started speaking for ourselves. All this time he was saying, it's okay, I'll walk 2 steps behind my man. It's okay, I'll let my husband do the talking for me. It's okay if I do not speak. It's okay, I don't have to comment on every subject. But now I think women themselves are realizing that we need to speak. Until unless we do not speak for ourselves, nobody else is going to do. And I always found it very amusing when people, most of the time came and asked me, how was it to break the glass ceiling? I said, why none of the men are ever asked this question? I said, it's fine. I mean, what is so great about women breaking the glass ceiling? I mean, are you saying that you're allowing us to do it now? Or you have provided us the platform to do it now? We have done it from day one. Just that you are recognizing us now.
So how did you never see the ceiling? Because that's fantastic.
I never had a ceiling. All I could see was sky. I wanted to go beyond that.
Did it come naturally to you? Because in fact, what you seem to do so effortlessly is to not see the ceiling. Most women who have accomplished it first saw it, then felt they had to break it, but they registered a barrier. It is very, very special to not register that barrier.
I do not register. I don't see a barrier. I will register a barrier because if I am doubtful about my own capabilities, my own abilities.
What was the source of that conviction in yourself?
I could do it, that's it. I mean, I didn't have time to think. When I took up the responsibility of the family as a 16-year-old teenager with 3 older brothers and my mom, in an unknown city like Chennai, I think I just didn't see anything. All I could see is I need to succeed. I need to succeed on my terms. I need to succeed and prove to this world and my father that I can do things on my own terms and still make a good life out of it. I don't have to compromise. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to be dependent on a man to do it for me. I don't know. I think I just had that in me. And I was so busy working that I didn't see any barrier. I didn't see any ceiling. So even when you talk about the glass ceiling, I'm like, hello? Was it there? I don't see anything. I never saw anything. So I think just that I have been that kind of a person.
But Kaveree, to come back to you and to the women who you've spoken to for the book, what is the common strand that you found in them?
I think it was their mothers, and I think Khushbu said that as well. Either it was the mothers who were propelling them because they didn't want their daughters to live their life. They felt that they, with their education, with their talent, had sort of confined themselves to a domesticity that they couldn't get out of. So either it was that, or it was the daughters not wanting to be like their mothers, But in both cases, I think it was the mothers, and it was the mothers who were pushing the daughters, usually, enabling them to get a good education, making sure that they were not sort of, they didn't end up thinking, being good in the kitchen was the only thing that they could do well. But it really was their mothers that most of them mentioned when it came to role models or inspirations. And I think that's true of mostly all women. We really do idolize our mothers.
So there's an interesting strand in the book, and it's not surprising it comes from Shobha Day. When you ask about growing old gracefully, she says she'd like to grow old disgracefully, right? Now, the question really is propriety. So one is power and one is success and so on. But the sense of propriety that women are meant to inhabit, this is female, this is proper, there's a desirable way to be. What did you ever feel, how did you arrive at your sense of, for example, speaking up and saying, this is a truth, premarital sex happens, women sleep with people like men sleep with people because really somebody's sleeping with somebody. And how do you then say that without worrying about the consequences and say, I'll deal with the consequences because I'm only speaking what is natural? That you made it outlawed or that you made it impossible for me to speak doesn't make it unnatural for me to speak. That little shift from propriety, how did that come to you? And have you found again the willingness to be improper as a requirement to be a successful woman?
You want to go first?
I think when I made that statement, the biggest issue was it was a woman who made a statement. If it was a man, nobody would have bothered
No, he
about
would
it.
have been responsible. He would have been called responsible and
Yes,
progressive.
Exactly, very progressive. So for me, the problem was I was a woman and my profession. I come from cinema. So women who are in cinema, who are in films, are not supposed to be intelligent. You have to at least pretend to be dumb bimbos. That was the whole idea then, 10 years back or 15 years back. But unfortunately for the people who went against me, who were doing dharnas, who were in front of my street and blocking the roads and not allowing me to move, they didn't realize that they were dealing with somebody else. They expected that they're dealing with a woman who's going to break down, sit around corner and say, okay, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, take my words back. But the minute I turned around and said, to hell with you, I'm not going to apologize because I know this is the truth. And again, my biggest strength was because I knew I was speaking the truth. And I was writing a column because I remember India Today was about HIV. And in Tamil Nadu, Namakkal area was #1 in India for HIV virus people because everything is about the lorry drivers, the truck drivers. And that is what I was talking about. I said, you find these newborn kids being thrown on the streets. They are not legitimate. If they were legitimate, they would find a roof. They're illegitimate children. And illegitimate children do not come because you looked at her and she looked at you and say, oh, I'm pregnant. It doesn't happen that way. So let's face it. Let's face the facts. How long are you going to push a problem under the carpet? So you need to, until unless you don't speak out, you don't speak the truth, you're not going to deal with the problem. You're not going to find a solution to a problem. To find a solution, first you have to speak the truth. And that is what I did. So I was very clear that I have spoken the fact, I have spoken the truth. So I don't have to be scared. And I think my biggest support system, I would say, was my husband. Because he knew what I said was right. And he said, are you ashamed of yourself? I said, are you mad? He said, cool, go ahead. For 5 years, 10 years, face it, you're ready? I said, I'm fine. He said, go ahead, face it. So I think my biggest support system came from him. Though he never came in the forefront or he spoke for me, or not even once in those 10 years, he ever gave a statement. But I knew back home I have a big support system in it. And you will not believe I had the best of my work in those 10 years of court hassles, 2005 to 5 years, 2010. So those 5 years I did the best of work. I won the best of awards. And life was bliss. We were traveling world over with 2 little kids. And I think when you speak the truth, you don't have to fear anything or anybody. That was my...
I think in my case, I know it's a very polite company, but women don't tend to talk about their bodies. But really, menopause sometimes can be the biggest source of freedom. And after a certain point, I think women rediscover themselves. And I think 50s can be the best time. I don't, of course, want to tell you how old I am. But, women are living longer. Women are healthier. They're taking care of themselves. They realize that there are 20 years left, there are 25 years left in them. They want to do more than just what they've been doing. And I think that, is a great source that we need to tap as a society. There are a lot of menopausal women out there who, don't have the hassle of bodily functions and all that anymore, and can they just go out there and be
live
a
their
great
best
force for
lives.
change and
So,
live the best life.
There's now, and particularly if you're urban, particularly if you're privileged to inhabit the spaces and the lives that we do, you have now also support systems, thankfully families, but also we too can hire what we could not earlier hire for, right? However, there is a particular disproportionate, and I'm using the word burden, I'm not necessarily saying it's a burden, that still falls on women. There's an interesting phrase that was referenced in an article, curiously about infidelity, saying the emotional heart of that little tribe, which is a family unit. The emotional task still falls to the woman, right? And by that it means you're responsible for the emotional well-being often of the spouse, of the children, often of your parents. You're responsible more often than not for your extended social networks, right? You'll take the responsibility, even little things, the gifts, the gestures, and so on. Is there a way you see that those emotional burdens will also start to be shared, or responsibilities, if not burdens? Because you clearly have that support system of an emotional sharing. Did you find that the successful women you spoke to had the emotional support system from men as well, or merely the physical?
I think they were able to redefine the family unit. And I think that's very important. At some points, the man can be the primary caregiver. At some points, the woman can be the primary caregiver. They had partners, I think, who were able to step back at some point and allow the woman to bear maybe the economic burden, and they would sort of shoulder the emotional burden, or the other way around. And I think that increasingly, that flexibility in a family unit has to be a ground rule. Otherwise, as we go into a new decade, we cannot live by the old rules anymore. You cannot have the man does this and the woman does this and the children do this. Everything is being rewritten as we speak. So you have to have a family unit that is flexible enough, adaptable enough for this change. And I think emotionally, financially, you'll find the roles of women and men shifting, sometimes adapting, flexible, somebody takes a back seat, somebody takes the front foot. I think that will happen. It should happen.
Before we end, I have a question for both of you about parenting, but differently. Because you are bringing up two girls, you're bringing up two boys. How are you teaching them to demand more from men? How are you teaching them to give more to women?
I am trying to teach them through example, but I have to say that my dogs are better behaved than my boys. My dogs are two boys too. But it's a sad truth of life, but they're extremely well behaved. And I wish, I know my boys will hate me, it's okay. But I wish my boys were as well behaved and as sensitive and as loving and caring as my dogs are. I hope they learn from them.
Okay, I think I just tell my daughters that just be who you are. They have to be who they are. It's not about having celebrity parents. They have their own identity. They have their own way of living their lives. So I think I just let them be the way they want to be. And that is what I have always believed in, rather than forcing my ideas and my thoughts. So this is how you should live, this is how you should behave, this is how you should dress up. I think it's they who need to decide, because they are going to be in charge of their future. So until and unless they do not come into a full circle as to who they are, they will never be able to achieve what they want to. So it's up to them what they want to do.
Thank you both. This is, as I said, just the starting point for a conversation. Kaveree's book is outside. Please do use the opportunity to buy it.
I want to give this to Khushbu, please.
Thank you so much.
And more than anyone, I think you embody this spirit for me of no regrets.
Thank you so much.
And to all the women in the audience, let's just give ourselves a very well-deserved round of applause. We work much harder than we should have to.
And for the men too, it's all right. You can learn to live with powerful women.
Thank you so much, both of you, for being here this evening.